Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. Well, we're halfway through the election. We've gone through the Labor Day weekend, and I thought it would be really good to check in with two friends of mine. One's a conservative, the other is a liberal. At least I think they're both liberal and conservative, and check in on how things are going. They're both in the public affairs, government affairs, public policy consulting area. The first person I'd like to introduce you to is Marc Kealey. Marc is the president of K&A Inc., a Canadian public policy research and management consulting company. He's got clients throughout Canada and globally. And he's done for the last couple of elections research where he's been trying to predict the outcomes. And he's got, I think, 40,000 Canadians, Marc, that you say that you've got a database of that you track and what their opinions are. And so we're going to come back to him and see what he thinks in regards to where the election is. And then also Sara MacIntye, who was communications person for Harper when Stephen Harper was Prime Minister of Canada. She was Director of Communications for Christy Clark when Christy was the Premier of British Columbia. She's been involved in public policy and government policy and government affairs and all that kind of stuff for numerous years. And she's got some very profound points of view, provocative points of view. So we're looking forward to what Sara has to say, warning, obviously, given her experience, maybe from the right, and what Marc has to say, warning, maybe given his background. He worked for John Turner, maybe from the center/center left. So Marc, Sara, welcome to my show. How are you?
Great. Thanks for having us, Brian.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. It's good to see you. You too,
Good to see you. So, you know, weekend is over. People are back to work, back to school, sort of. And we're halfway through the election. Marc, what do you think? What's going on? Is Justin going to be able to pull it out of the bag, or is this one of the worst calls he's ever made?
Well, thanks for that introduction, Brian. But let me just say, first of all, I think because it's after Labor Day, the campaign is actually going to start now. I don't think people really have been paying attention to the degree that, you know, Sara and I, who are pundits, or you as an observer, would really think has been taking place. I mean, the media have had a bit of a field day with some of the foibles that the Liberals had at the outset. But I really think right now, going into the debates this week, we're going to see kind of a tightening of this race. I can tell you, and you know, over the last couple of weeks, the missteps for the Liberal campaigns, they've been pretty stark, but I think the big wedge issue, I think right now, are the missteps by Erin O'Toole on guns. I think that's a big deal, and I think we're going to see probably a very feisty debate this week.
Sara, what do you think? Where are we?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's surprising to me that Justin Trudeau is still getting dogged by the question, why now? Why do we need this now, basically at the beginning of the fourth wave? And he doesn't seem to have a good answer yet. And it shows in his campaign. He's been knocked off kilter, protesters at every event, some events being canceled. He has Sundays that are basically off days, whereas the other leaders are really finding their stride. I think Jagmeet Singh's really found his stride. His events are really, his speeches and policy announcements are a bit extreme, but they are well thought out for his base, his potential base. He's got to try to eat into some of that liberal voter support base that he lost in the last election. And Erin O'Toole, I think, is, you know, pleasantly, I've been impressed with his campaign. It's been tight. It's been on message. He doesn't get knocked off kilter very easily. I'll agree with Marc with respect to the changing position on assault weapons has been troubling for him. I think he'll be able to get through that and clear it up in the next debate. But I'll also agree with Marc, and you know, this isn't why you brought us on for us to agree, Brian, but I'll agree that now people are really starting to pay attention, right? Like, this is the most normal we have felt as a world, as a people, in 18 months. Kids are going back to school. People are vaccinated. Travel's opening up again. People are thinking about, you know, where they're going to be able to go for family vacations for Christmas. So they're now going to be paying attention to, you know, what are these leaders saying and what are they promising me and how is it going to benefit me?
We're chatting today with Marc Kealey and Sara MacIntye about the current status of the federal election. We're going to take a break for some messages, come back more with Marc and Sara in just a minute. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour, Saga 960. A real pleasure of mine tonight to introduce again to you, because both Marc and Sara have been on my show previously. Marc Kealey is the president of KNA Inc., a Canadian public policy research and management consulting company, and Sara MacIntye, former communications person with both Prime Minister Stephen Harper and Premier of BC Christy Clark, runs a company by the name of Vucasera that does similar work in public policy, government affairs, etc. One a conservative, the other a liberal, sort of, I think. And so hopefully we'll have some good discussion. Marc, you were telling me that you track 40,000 people.
Yes.
And their opinions. And you've been able to, based on that, do a reasonably good prediction in the past of what's happened in the elections. Tell me what you've done in the past from a prediction standpoint and what your thinking and research is showing right now.
This came about, Brian. We started this in the 2010 election. As a matter of fact, a number of our clients internationally, particularly from the United States and Mexico, had said, we want to know what's happening in Canada. Give us a flavor for what could happen in the 2010 election. If you remember, that was a very long election. So there was ebbs and
2011 election. It was 42 days. I worked that one, Marc.
Very interesting. Anyway, when Harper was elected, I'm saying, in 2010. So we found it very fascinating. So we had a number of outreaches to people across Canada. And what we wanted to do was give a really pithy opportunity for however you want to call it, opinion around this. So it wasn't scientific like you would think, but people were reached by us either by email or by phone call to a landline or even a cell phone. Really fascinating, and it's grown over the years. The 2019 election was very, very interesting for us because we said it was going to be a minority. And so in this particular instance right now, we've been tracking our first iteration of our research will be Thursday, and that'll be before the election. And we've got, I'll just tell you the numbers right now because it's really interesting to do this. And, Sara and I are prognosticators, and we could debate this till the cows come home, Sara, but we have the CPC tracking at 147 seats. We have the Libs tracking at 125, the New Democrats at 31, and the Bloc at 35. There are we've got no green seats. There will be no independent seats, and there will certainly be no PPC seats. So it's really fascinating that there's a tightening from what our research is telling us from the folks with whom we've been dealing across this country. And it really is a good list, Brian. You've got folks all the way from St. Anthony, Newfoundland, all the way to Tofino in British Columbia. It's really fascinating.
So 145 for the Conservatives. So
147.
147. So minority Conservative government, and they would have enough with the Bloc or the NDP to get enough votes to make government.
Well, look, I mean, this is why this is great to be here with Sara. I'd love to see that fight because I can tell you right now, even the other two parties might say, well, we might not even support that party. You never know, Brian.
Sara, what do you think? Is Marc right?
Yeah, those are really interesting numbers. I mean, I think, we always say the only poll that matters is on election day. And of course, with our electoral system, first past the post, popular vote numbers aren't always an indicator of vote share or seat share. So it's always anybody's guess. And campaigns, in fact, do matter. I mean, ask the Nova Scotia Ian Rankin whether or not they matter. And I'm sure he'll tell you they do. But it's clear that the race is tightening up between the Liberals and the Conservatives. The issue for the Conservatives, and I'm sure Marc would probably agree, is that our voter base is very inefficient. So with the first past the post system, you just need the most votes, not a majority of votes, in order to take a seat. And so because most the demographics of Conservative voters are rural, there's not a lot of seats in those areas. And so really where the big gains can be made, the contests are going to be made, or it's going to be in the urban areas, but that's going to be basically between the Liberals and the NDP. The Conservatives are looking and it's sounding like, Marc, that probably shut out mostly from Quebec as the Bloc maintains its hold. Now, what I think is also interesting, and I'd be interested to see what your support numbers or those individuals that you talk to, Marc, is what's happening with the Maverick Party. So the Maverick Party was the Wexit Party. It was the Western Separatist Party that is now the interim leader is Jay Hill, who was House Leader under Stephen Harper And they strategically ran 48 candidates in very specific ridings. They've been very quiet, very well organized. And what does that mean? It means that a lot of seats that were never in play for the Liberals in the West are now in play because there's a split on the right that the Conservatives have never faced before. And it's a very real threat. We can talk about it here in Ontario and laugh at it and scoff at it. But if you go out to certain parts of Alberta, Saskatchewan, and northern British Columbia, the movement to separate is real and is palpable. So
Movement
again,
to separate Alberta from Canada. Seriously.
Yes, it's very real. Yeah, I mean, Jay Hill he's basically said his playbook is the Bloc Québécois playbook. And so they've chosen specific ridings where there was enough conservative surplus where they can actually come in and potentially win these seats.
So Marc, you didn't have any of the Maverick Party winning any seats in your numbers.
And it's interesting you say that, because I agree with Sarah that the issue is math. And if you look at, that's why I think even my numbers, the numbers we have, they could be skewed. Everybody's saying right now that this election is really going to be won in the province of Ontario. It could be. I would even get more micro and suggest that it's the 905 that could turn this around, largely because of math. You look at the surges right now, the surge in the NDP could actually help the Conservatives.
Well, that's what happened in 2011. In 2011, what happened is the Conservative vote went up by maybe a point or two. It was like, in Mississauga, Brampton, etc., it was slightly under 40%. I think it ended up at like 41% or something like that. So it just went up by a point or two. And what ended up happening, though, is the Liberal vote went down by like 7 to 10 points because the NDP vote went up. And I think, I may be wrong here, but I think the Conservatives won every single seat in Mississauga and Brampton but one.
That's
think
right.
They only lost, I think it was only Navdi Baines that was the only guy that held on to his seat. And then in 2000 and in the last, in the majority government, but also in the minority Trudeau government, only Andrew Scheer won the popular vote, but the NDP vote went down so much that the Conservatives didn't win one seat in all of Peel except Caledon, and lost Halton, lost Minister of Transportation seat, Linda.
Right. And I think from our perspective too, I think that look, there's some thinking right now that seats, even Mississauga Lakeshore, could be won by the Conservatives. It's a really fascinating dynamic what's happening.
Well, if you've got the Conservatives at 147, don't they have to win some of the 905?
Yes, they do. But I'm saying what we did is the 2019 election, we discounted, to be very blunt, we didn't think that the Conservatives would win any seats in the 905, and they did. I mean, they got Oshawa, they got a few more. So we're sort of going back and paying a lot of attention to the 905. But again, the point that Sarah's making, and I agree, is that even in Alberta, where you think that it would be a lock for the Conservatives to win every seat, that may not happen based on this whole Maverick Party actually pulling an NDP kind of a deal.
Now, if the Maverick Party is doing well, Sarah, how come Maxime Bernier's not?
Well, I think Maxime's doing extraordinarily well, considering it's just Maxime Bernier. He's getting the share of the vote that he's getting. And now his vote is even more inefficient than the Conservative Party. People are gravitating, and this is just me instinctually observing, nothing data-based at all. They're gravitating to the People's Party in response to the extreme duration of government lockdown measures. It's not because they really believe in the entire platform of the People's Party, but it's almost like a protest vote to what's been happening over the past 18 months. People have lost their life savings. Some people have lost their jobs. They've lost their homes. They've lost opportunities. They've lost hope. And it's that kind of insecurity that brings people to more extreme positions. And so I think that's where the appeal of Max is and the People's Party. But the other factor I wanted to bring up for the Conservatives is when Aaron O'Toole released his platform and included in that a price on carbon, so he's facing a fight from the People's Party nominally, the Maverick Party in the West, but now he's also not getting the support of Scott Moe or Jason Kenney or Doug Ford. You will notice, you will never see Aaron O'Toole in a photo op with them in the rest of the campaign because
Because of
they're
carbon
that
tax.
angry. They're that angry that he included it in the platform. So he doesn't have the party supporters, the party regional supporters, all of those things. So despite all of that, I still think Aaron is doing an incredible job. And I'm not working for the campaign. I haven't been involved in campaigns in a long time. And this is just me observing a tightly run campaign. And it's been pretty flawless so far. And, you know, some of the attack ads have been brilliant, absolutely brilliant.
I'm going to, you know, I don't want to get into some mudslinging here, but I think, you know, politics are really about perceptions. And one of the biggest issues that we have in Canada right now is the mood that Canadians have about gun control. And I think that Aaron O'Toole has made a tactical error by shooting himself in the foot, excuse the pun, Sarah, around that issue. I don't know how he's gonna get through that. I know that the debate's gonna be really, really tough on him for that. And the Prime Minister loves to get negative. So and I think he'll get very, very negative with him on this. The one thing that I hope he doesn't do is what, and I remember seeing you on Power in Politics where you talked about the need to have the leadership race to replace Andrew Scheer, largely because of the way he acted. But the election in 2019 was just his to lose, and he did.
Well, remember, he lost the seats, but he actually won the popular vote, which is
fair ball.
And,
but you know,
and he lost the 905, I think, because of social conservatism.
Yeah, but we you know, again, it doesn't matter if you win the popular vote; it's how many seats you get, Brian.
Yeah. So, Marc,
there's only one winner.
Just in case people aren't familiar with it, tell us what the assault weapons issue is.
Well, they're the Aaron O'Toole. Look, and I'm not going to be an apologist for him. Aaron O'Toole said that he would step back on the ban, and I think people immediately reacted. And he was asked very tough questions by media, and then he said, "Well, I'll keep the ban, but we'll look to have more input from people in this country." Look, you've got Moncton, you've got École Polytechnique, you've got a number of issues in this country where assault rifles have been used. I think people have spoken very clearly. They don't want them.
And then someone from the Conservative Party in a senior policy position, Sarah, I understand, came out and said, yes, we are going to get rid of the assault weapons ban. Is that correct?
You know, I was just messaging with her office asking them what clarity on that myself. I mean, there's been several news conferences where this question has dogged him that, you know, in the platform, it says one thing, but during the debate, he said another. And since then, he says he's going to maintain the assault ban, but he's going to delist certain other guns as from being labeled assault. So, you know, I'm not clear on this, and it's not a big, for me, it's not a big issue. I don't own a gun. I get the right for hunters and farmers and the need to, you know, have the ability to protect your livestock or to engage in hunting and et cetera as a mean of lifestyle. But I mean, I've always been anti-gun, and I think it's ridiculous that anyone would have an AK-47 in Canada.
But look, it is a big deal. It is a big deal.
But it is a big deal. Yes, it's not a big deal to me, but it is a big deal.
But I think it's a big deal for Canadians. Yeah.
But his support for gun owners isn't going to win him any other votes because they're already voting conservative anyway. But by coming out with this policy, it's going to lose him votes by people that get scared about it for all the reasons that Marc was identifying. It's one of these wedge issues like abortion, carbon taxes, et cetera, that he's been trying to, vaccines, that he's been trying to not allow to be wedge issues.
You know,
clarity. Sorry, go ahead, Marc.
If you let me jump in, Sarah, I just want to say this: like the Libs tried to take advantage of Aaron O'Toole on abortion. They failed and failed miserably. I think he did an extraordinary job on that. They failed.
Okay, hold on a second. Let me ask you, Sarah. So Aaron O'Toole's position was that on a woman's right to choose, that a doctor that doesn't want to provide an abortion has the right to not provide the abortion, but does not have to recommend someone that would. And so the way that it's been described is the Liberal NDP position is a woman's right to choose, and the Conservative position is a doctor's right to choose. Is that fair or not fair?
No, I think those are two different issues. I think Aaron's been clear. He's always been pro-choice. He always has been as a politician. He's always been on the record. He's behind a woman's pro-choice or ability to choose. What the other issue is, though, is allowing a doctor to still have a religious conscience while still practicing that position. We're still practicing as a medical professional. Now, I don't know why they came up with that in their platform and why they pushed that out there, protecting physicians' conscious, I think they called it, or consciousness. Or I'm not quite sure what the terminology was. But, end game, and the way you end it is say, I'm pro-choice, period. If
So
you're
Marc
explaining, you're losing. You're explaining, you're losing. And this is what's happening with what I think Marc has identified is Aaron is constantly trying to explain where he stands on the ban. And when you're explaining, you are losing. And Aaron is losing on this. And I believe that, for a lot of urban Canadians, that it is a big issue. For a lot of Canadians that have seen big increases in gang violence in places like Montreal and Toronto during the pandemic. Aaron's tried to differentiate himself, saying, well, I'm going to focus on those guns that are coming in illegally to Canada, because those are the ones that actually perpetrate the crimes in our cities. However, I think that because the fact that I don't know his position and can explain it is obviously a sign that it's a problem for him and the party.
So Marc, it sounds like Sara agrees with you that the Liberals tried to create it as a wedge issue, and it's not a wedge issue. The second one was vaccines. Explain that one.
Well, I don't think right now, and I think this relates directly to Sara's point on how to explain to me why you're calling this election. And I've heard this now from thousands and thousands of Canadians. And it reminds me of 1990 all over again, when David Peterson took 5 weeks to tell Ontarians why he called an election. And it failed miserably. And I think in this particular case, he can't, I'm talking Justin Trudeau, he can't articulate a reason why he's calling this election. And that's going to stick. The whole idea about we got this pandemic and I got to get through this, et cetera, just isn't cutting it with people. And to say when you've got, and I give kudos to your leader, Sara, when he says, look, if you don't want to get your vaccine, you have that right, but then you got to submit to a test. And I think that that's a reasonable example to follow in this particular instance. But to pit people against each other as being a vaxxer or an anti-vaxxer or those people is really something that's dogging Justin Trudeau right now. I'm seeing it in the memo text we're getting from people and some of the commentary that they're sending back. So the only thing that I think he's got left is this terrible shot in the foot by Aaron O'Toole on gun control. And I think they're going to take extraordinary advantage of that coming this week.
So you're saying the whole reason for election in the middle of a pandemic is because Aaron O'Toole wants to change the assault weapons ban?
No, I'm just saying. The Prime Minister, it gave the Prime Minister, the leader of the Liberal Party, an opportunity to find his wedge. And I think he's found it.
Well, but he's got to be careful, right? Because if you go too far on this, like the Liberals generally do in attacks, it will ring of disingenuousness. Remember Stephen Harper's Soldiers in the Streets?
Yes.
Do you remember those attack ads?
Yes,
that went too far, right? And people were like, really? This guy from Leaside, Toronto is going to be putting soldiers in the street? Like, so they got to be careful how far that they play that. And I know it's really the only thing that is actually sticking to Aaron, so they're going to get excited about it. But I also think that people have seen a little bit of Aaron right now and have liked him more and more the more that they see him. And he comes across as very reasonable, very reasoned, and a listener and a leader. And I think that if they hang their hat on this issue, then, it's generally it's definitely minority territory for the Liberals and for perhaps minority territory for the Conservatives.
Sara, I'm surprised that you're so positive. I remember you making a comment to me at one point in time about Stockwell Day and his wetsuit and the jet ski in Kelowna.
I love Stockwell Day, by the way. Anyway, Stock, it was a great Photoshop. I'm still friends with him. please don't make him mad at me.
This Photoshop of Aaron O'Toole on the men's fitness cover of his policy booklet, you don't think was a problem?
No, I don't. I think, look, it's always very careful how you curate the image of the leader. And what did you want? He looks like he's a fit dad that's ready to take over from the dorky son that had the reins for the past 6 years and has run the economy into the ground. So, no, I think it was, would it have been my choice of photo? Probably not. I would have had him probably with a family or at a construction site or something, or doing something that's a little bit more modern than, just being Captain Dad.
you
We're
know,
chatting tonight with Marc Kealey and Sara MacIntye about the status of the current federal election campaign. We're going to take a break for some messages and come back more with Marc and Sara in just a minute. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. I'm having a lot of fun chatting tonight with an old friend of mine from Liberal politics, Marc Kealey, and a recent friend of mine from just public policies issues, who's a former conservative partisan and communications expert, Sara MacIntye. Marc and Sara, welcome back to the show. I really appreciate it. We're talking about what's going on. We're halfway through the campaign. Sara, what would be your advice now to people thinking about, to the leaders, about what they got to do in the second half of the campaign?
Well, this is now when people are paying attention. So they got to talk about, and we say this every election, Marc will probably roll his eyes when I say it, is pocketbook issues. So what are the big issues for Canadian families right now? Well, it's security in the sense of what's going to happen with the Delta variant. It's also housing costs is a huge issue. And, it's daycare. It's all of those things that people have been trying to manage and muddle through for the past 12 to 18 months. And some people have lost their life savings during this time. And so what is a leader going to do to build a more inclusive recovery? That it means that it's a recovery that, the vulnerable workers are included in. It's also finding the mix match between labor shortages and the unemployment rules and the CERB rules. How are we going to get ourselves out of this? Can we just grow our way out of it? As Justin Trudeau used to say, we grow from the heart. Are we looking for those platitudes, or people are looking for concrete solutions? And what are the policies and programs that are going to affect their day-to-day budgeting and their day-to-day life? And I think that that's what leaders really need to focus and hone in on. And of course, you're going to see the attack ads are going to go up, the differentiators, the wedge issues, and then what sticks to what leader. It seems that Justin Trudeau, unbelievably, outside of Rob Ford, I've never seen a leader go through so many scandals and it not stick to him in terms of his popularity. It's absolutely gobsmacking to me. But there is a level of anger in the populace right now. And the leader that can figure out how to harness that without being divisive is going to win.
Marc, we got the leadership debates coming up this week. You've been in those processes preparing people for leaders debate. What do you do? How do you get people prepared for those debates?
Well, in a way, what they actually do is they'll have a mock-up. So they'll have the number of podiums, and they'll have the mock-up in a room, and somebody will play Aaron O'Toole, somebody will play Jagmeet Singh, somebody will play Duclos, somebody will play Enemy Paul, et cetera, et cetera. And the leader, Justin Trudeau in this particular case, will fend off questions, and they're tough. It's really tough. And I think they know the people that are playing those alternatives are really going to go hard at him on some of these issues. I think, look, Sara makes an interesting comment. I think people right now are going to, they're sort of tired of the act. I even said that on TV in 2019. The act is getting a bit tired. And when you put yourself in a position to be the focus of your party, I think the other leaders are going to talk about that. And so I think that's going to come out. So he's going to temper some of his responses to that. I think too, and people aren't stupid. I mean, they've looked at the fact that, look, the Integrity Commissioner has adjudicated on a number of the issues that the Conservatives wanted to make political gain about in the House of Commons, and it never happened with the Commissioner. So I think that those are issues that are dead, but there's some other things that are probably going to come up too. This week, Jody Wilson-Raybold's book comes out, and that's going to be really interesting because of what she's got to say. So in advance of the leaders' debate too, I think those questions might come out.
Do
leadership debates count, Sara?
Oh, absolutely. They can be turning points for leaders, either in a good way or in a bad way. And it also, what debates really do is it cements in the voters' minds their preconceived notions of who these leaders are as people. And generally, the performance of the debate either confirms that, or it generally confirms that, and then therefore it impacts the way that they're going to vote. So, if you remember, math is hard. I have a binder of women. These things matter. They reinforce things about what people already think of the leaders. And so, in that regard, it is kind of it's kind of a checklist where people are like, yeah, that's exactly what I thought of that guy, or that's exactly what I thought of that party or that leader, X, Y, and Z. Then they kind of don't pay attention again until 2 days before the polls, and then they go in and they make up their mind. And hopefully they will go in and make up their mind, or they'll do their mail-in ballot.
I just hope, Sarah, excuse me, Brian, I just hope, Sarah, that they don't have a format like they had in 2019. That was the worst format for a debate.
Worst format ever. Like, I would have watched Biden and Trump 10 times over before I watched that last debate. Like, I was, oh my God, it was terrible.
Marc, you worked for John Turner, and
Yes.
And he was on the receiving end of probably one of the most noteworthy lines in Canadian leadership debate history when Brian Mulroney said, "You could have shown leadership." And I understand that Aaron O'Toole tried that in the debate in French this past week. What do you think? Do you practice quips like that, and do they work?
Of course, you practice quips like those. I mean,
Yes.
even that line after the 2015 election, where Justin Trudeau was lobbed, this is what you've got as many men as you got women. He said, "Well, it's 2015." Of course, that was all practiced. So yeah, these things are not off the cuff. But in 1984, it was a really unfortunate thing that happened. But that sort of set the stage for leaders' debates in future. Because in '88,
So, Sarah, if you were advising, sorry, go ahead, Marc.
in '88, if you recall, Turner took that debate. I don't care
He
what.
did, and
I do recall. I was in grade 6 at the time, or 7, I think it was, and I'm not quite sure. It was the first election I got interested in politics. So you can thank Turner for me.
Right?
well, and Turner did so well in that '88 debate that he almost turned the
Yes.
polls of the election. And a lot of people think that in I'm going to try to figure out 2015 that Harper would have won if it hadn't been for the debate, that Trudeau proved he was actually worth something. As Sarah mentioned, it was the longest campaign in history, and that for a while the Liberals were in third place in the polls, but the Conservatives did such a good job of stressing that Justin was not up to the job, and underwhelming, that when he actually turned in a stellar debate performance, the polls turned and they went from third place to first place over the course of the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, I mean, if your expectation is, a straw man, then, you've got nowhere to go but up. So I think that the Conservatives kind of miscalculated that. And I think they also miscalculated, much like Obama, that Justin Trudeau was an heir of young, fresh, and hope. And it was, a lot, the Liberal Party, of course, did attack ads, but the Liberal leader did not. And I think that was a smart play by the Liberals in order to kind of reinforce to new voters about who he was, and really a big differentiator with Stephen Harper, who is known to fight with everybody and every time with everyone for all reasons in perpetuity.
So Sarah,
Which he wasn't. It wasn't a fair characterization, but yeah, sorry, go ahead, Brian.
Sarah, if you were advising Aaron O'Toole in this week coming up to the leadership debate, what would you tell him to do?
On the leadership debate, I think he's just got to hold Justin Trudeau's record up, and then hold up his platform and really talk to issues that are important to everyday Canadians. Don't get kind of caught up in, don't get caught up in doing grandstanding or, really trying to win it with one quip. You've got to do a slow, steady race wins the race, or slow, steady pace wins the race. And I think that that's what he's been doing so far. He's out every single day. He's in very key areas, the strategic areas for the Conservatives. His messaging has been super tight. The ads have been well. The platform was really well thought out. A lot of innovative policies, addressing the opioid crisis as a national health crisis, because it is. And it's nice to hear a Conservative talk like that. And having an environmental policy, but also talking about housing costs and childcare costs and all of these other things that people are focused on and actually do have an impact on your day-to-day life. And providing that positive alternative, and not, I would have Aaron not necessarily being the one that's been seen to attacking Justin Trudeau and his failures and ineptitudes and scandals, but really to be offering a positive message forward, a path forward. That's what got Justin Trudeau the first time. It does appeal to voters, and it appeals to voters that are outside the traditional Conservative base.
Marc, if your numbers are right, Justin Trudeau is losing what, 30, 35 seats? Like that's huge. If you were advising the Prime Minister, what would you be telling him to do? He's got to come out fighting like crazy.
Well, he is going to fight. He's a good fighter and he's a good campaigner, and he likes to be, he's a tough guy too that way. And all you have to do is look at when he fought the good senator in a boxing match, and nobody thought he was going to win because he was slight, and he won. My point is, he's a good fighter. But I'm going to say this: if I was given the opportunity to give him really sound advice, I'd say be humble, say sorry. You've got a team, and actually go forward with your team. When you talk about all the things that Sara talked about, the Liberals have done. In terms of having good fiscal guardrails, I think that they've put in a good budget from this last go around. I'd say that Indigenous issues in this country are getting resolved, and I think that the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and the recommendations from that are certainly something that the Liberals could take advantage of. There are a number of other social issues that the Liberals could say, look, we've done that. But right now, a lot of it's being lost. And I keep saying this to my friends in the party right now. You say it's Team Trudeau, but you've taken the team out of it. It's just Trudeau. And when people start to hate him, and the act gets tired, then it's going to impact on their vote. And that's what I think needs to change. And maybe they'll listen.
What about Jagmeet Singh? We haven't talked about him that much. He's really impressed me, both during the last couple of years as well as this campaign. And I think that, as we talked about, if he does well, that's going to really help the Conservatives because of splits, particularly in the 905, but elsewhere in major metropolitan areas and suburbs around the major metropolitan areas. And if the NDP win a bunch of seats in downtown Toronto, it's game over for the Liberals, in addition to those splits. So what about Jagmeet Singh? Sara, what's he got to do?
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I've been impressed with him. Obviously, he's finding his stride. I know he was fielded a question in the last newser about, well, you're not really getting the support back in Quebec, like the Orange Wave under Jack Layton. And he quickly responded and reminded people, well, Jack's support level and experience didn't come just after one election. You learn and you grow into the job. And I think that he has been. Now, I think that for him, he really has to, remind voters, and he's been doing a good job of this, saying, when the CERB came in, the Liberals wanted to do this. We pushed them to do more for you. We pushed them to do more for businesses. And it was the NDP who had the balance of power in this minority government and actually did have the ability to actually implement and force different policy decisions than what the sitting government was wanting. And so he has to remind people to claim credit for how he's helped them through the probably most difficult year that most people have ever lived through. And, at the same time, that's happened globally. I think what he really needs to do, though, is how is he different than the Liberals? How is he different? The Liberals have gone so far left that the NDP really doesn't have any room except for a 75% capital gains tax, which is crazy. It's actually Stalin-esque. To have that level
it's
of
what
taxation.
Stalin-esque?
Yes.
Is that what you said?
I did. 75% capital gains tax. Come on. Why don't you just take it off? What's the incentive to have any gains? Come on. Anyway, look, he's been doing well. He's spending the time in the right ridings, and it's showing in the polls. The problem for Jagmeet Singh isn't Jagmeet Singh. It's the fact that Quebecers are xenophobic. And Bill, the numbers that Jack Layton enjoyed will never be enjoyed by the NDP as long as Jagmeet Singh's the leader. And that is not a reflection on him as a leader, it's a reflection on Quebecers. Really?
Brian,
Yeah.
just on that issue, I want to sort of glob onto what Sara's saying. In our research, 18 to 25-year-olds, because we've got it by age category as well, are becoming a lot more equivocal on this, and they like the NDP. It's really interesting, and so he's a bit of a breath of fresh air. So that number, and you're seeing something like 59% are saying, I'm going to vote NDP.
I got to
Look,
tell you, I've spoken to a lot of people, some below the age of 18, so they're not going to be voting, but young people that follow him on TikTok and are really
It's
impressed with his TikTok
he's cool.
posts.
He's cool. When he goes on his skateboard and he does selfies, and it's incredible. And when he takes his turban off and people get to see how his hair looks longer than Sarah's, it's great.
Yeah.
Okay, but Mark, in 2011, I had a big debate, as you probably might remember, with liberals in Mississauga saying our enemy is not the Conservatives, it's the NDP. You've got to get that NDP vote down. And people didn't listen. They still went after the Conservatives. And I think that's exactly what the Liberals are doing again today, is they're going after the Conservatives. And the people that are going to lose their seats is the strength of the NDP. So what should the Liberals be doing to keep that NDP vote down, or you can't do anything?
Well, look, I think he's a spoiler, to be very honest. And the same thing we talked about at the outset with the Mavericks. Here's the problem we're going to have. That the Liberal Party and the Conservative Party know that the NDP are never going to form government. But the problem is when you have this kind of yin and yang like we've got between Conservatives, or an increase in the NDP, it's going to benefit the Conservatives. That math is just going to play out in a first past the post.
We're chatting with Marc Kealey and Sara MacIntye about the upcoming federal election. We got one last break for some messages, and we're going to come back with some concluding comments in just a minute. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour, Saga 960. We're chatting today with Sara MacIntye. She runs a company by the name of Vucasera that specializes in government affairs, public policy, etc. And Marc Kealey, and Marc similarly runs a company in public policy, consulting, government affairs, etc. Marc's been historically a Liberal, Sara historically a Conservative, though they're getting along tonight, which is a point, but maybe we'll come back to that in a minute. Marc, if your numbers hold up, the Conservatives, I think you said 147, the Liberals down in the 120s?
125, yeah.
125. So what happens? Does the Governor General offer it to Erin O'Toole? Does Trudeau have to concede before that happens? Does Trudeau try to work with the NDP? Given your numbers, he can't do it with just the NDP. And Sara, you were saying during the break about what happened in regards to the Conservatives not working with separatists. Do you think they'll work with separatists this time?
No, I think absolutely. I mean, the coalition crisis, I think for our party, the Conservative Party, it was a turning moment for the party in the sense that it was a line in the sand that our voter base will not go through or go past. And if there's any musing whatsoever to work with the Bloc on anything, it will be problematic for the leader and the party and the voter base. Now, what about, will they work with the Mavericks? So what if the Mavericks get 6 or 7 seats, and that could make the difference on every piece of legislation? Well, they're stated in their party constitution that they're a separatist party too. So now we're going to get called into these really interesting scenarios where you're going to have the Conservatives potentially relying on the NDP or the Liberals in order to get any kind of policy or legislation through. Now, this is all hypothetical, of course, and as Marc knows, we're not supposed to talk about hypotheticals in politics because it could, it ends up biting you in the derriere when it proves out to be false or true. But it's interesting. Again, when we're talking with this, it's all numbers, it's all math. First past the post doesn't mean just because these popular polls that we're seeing out right now are actually what's going to end up in terms of vote or seat share in the House of Commons.
So, Marc, what do you think? Does Justin Trudeau, if he actually gets 20 less seats or more than 20 less seats than Erin O'Toole, does he resign on election night? Does he?
Look, our research is a moment in time, right? So we're going to do one more iteration of this before the election, and then we should have probably another show to talk about what our numbers might say in advance of the election.
I look forward to it.
And I think we should, because we did this with other national media outlets in the last election, and frankly, I think that all of the pollsters were wrong because they thought that it was going to be a cakewalk, that the Conservatives would win a majority. Anyway, my point is simply this. This is going to be so fascinating after this is over for a number of reasons. Number one, you will probably have a couple of million mail-in ballots. So we may not even know election night what would happen. That's number one. Number two, you look at my numbers, 125, 31, 35. right, for the Libs, NDP, and Bloc respectively, that's enough for a majority if he wanted to go down that path. So if I was advising the leader, don't be so rash to say you're going, because everybody wants him. If you don't get your majority or minority, you're going to resign. I wouldn't.
So is that an accord like David Peterson and the NDP, or is it a coalition?
Sure. And I think that makes a heck of a lot of sense. But then what does Aaron O'Toole do? It says, I've got the most seats. So I could see.
And then what does the Governor General do?
Well, that's what I was just going to get to, Sarah. That would be a fascinating thing.
I know, right? I'm thinking, would she call Michael Jean and be like, what happened in 2008? Can you help me?
This would be worse than the King Bing affair. I think it's great.
Yeah.
And it could take, so Brian, your point's well taken. In 85, when they went down, that took months and months and months for that accord to come to fruition, for David Peterson and the NDP to have that pact that got the Liberals to wipe out that conservative 43-year hegemony. So I think in this particular case, it'll be really fascinating. So, all bets are off to think that, Justin Trudeau is done.
I'm reminded, and I can't remember the election, but Pierre Trudeau lost government to Joe Clark, and Joe Clark won a minority government, and he was gone within, 18 months or 12 months or something like that, because the very first budget was defeated, and because he had resigned, but they hadn't had a leadership convention as of yet, he retook the leadership and won a majority government, and that majority government ended up passing the Canadian Constitution, the Charter of Rights, and et cetera. So that suggests don't be hasty and resign too quick, I guess.
That's right.
I think so, but I also think it depends on the culture of the party. If you're not able to deliver, if you've had a couple of kicks of the can and you're not able to deliver the goods, I don't think that means that you need to resign. I do think it means a leadership review. So what does the base, what does your party think about your performance in the general election? If you didn't get a majority, so that you didn't get a mandate from the public, then you do have to face your party. But every party is different. And I'm a huge advocate that if you're a leader and you don't deliver and get a mandate from the public, then you have to go back to your base and say, okay, do I still have your support?
Okay, we're almost done. Let's go around.
I'll just say though on that, Brian, I think that, this is the Justin Trudeau party. So he might be inoculated against that kind of thing, Sarah. But there's a lot of...
I've heard there's an agreement that whatever the outcome is, Justin's going to be on for a couple of months, and then Chrystia Freeland's going to take over.
I can't wait.
He's basically running government anyway, so...
I can't wait to do this again.
Okay,
I know,
let's hear the prediction. Marc, what do you predict?
I say it's going to be a minority.
For?
Well, my numbers hold out. It's a minority for the Conservatives. They'll have 147 seats.
Sarah, what do you think?
Oh, man, it's anyone's to get. Well, it's a Liberal or Conservative, right? One or the other. Now, is it minority or majority? I think I'm tending to side with Marc here, that I think it's probably going to be a Conservative minority. Now, who and how they're going to work out a coalition arrangement, or is it going to be piece by piece? Who knows? So there's still a lot of interesting things to prognosticate about.
Sounds like it's going to be a fascinating, we thought this was going to be an election that didn't matter, and it's going to be a fascinating couple of weeks as we come to election day. Let's all check in again in 2 weeks, okay?
We'll love to do it. Okay.
Sarah MacIntye, Vuka Sarah, Marc Kealey, it's K&A Inc. Thank you so much, both Marc and Sarah, for joining us. That's our show for tonight. You can get me every Monday through Friday at 6 o'clock on 960 AM. You can stream me online at saga960am.ca. You can get all my podcasts and video casts on briancrombie.com. And you can get me on election night all night long on 960 AM. Good night, everybody.
See ya.